Welcome to Poolpanda, the information channel for all topics that have to do with pools and pool equipment in your garden. Today we want to talk about sand filter systems in this video. We also want to go through what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, and what you have to consider for getting the best results. Yes, sand filter systems are generally used when you say you want a particularly high level of performance, or you want to replace an existing cartridge filter system. Or you generally want a level of performance that cannot be achieved with a cartridge filter system. And the larger the pool, the more advisable it is to use a sand filter. Why actually? Simply because sand filter systems have a lot of pressure, which means that even if you have a sand filter system that has the same throughput as a cartridge filter pump, it usually still has more pressure. Then we look at the filter media next. Sand is most commonly used. Here you have the advantage that sand is very cheap to buy. The water that comes from the pool goes into the sand filter system and is pressed through the sand here in the tank, and the coarse particles get stuck in the sand, and that is practically the filter process. Then the filtered water goes back here from the sand filter into the pool, and that's pretty much the whole process. I just said that the coarse particles get stuck because the smaller particles, which are smaller than the grain of sand, simply rush through. Is this bad? Yes and no. The particles that rush through are so small that it still works. But nonetheless, if you say you want to increase filter accuracy, just use flocculants, such as flock cartridges. This gives you the advantage that very small particles, such as dust particles, clump together through the flock cartridges. And then they get stuck in the sand again because they've just clumped together and are getting bigger. This gives you even more precise filtering and very clear water. What's also important with the sand, pay attention to what the manufacturer specifies. For example, if the manufacturer specifies a sand grain size of 0.03 to 0.05 inches, then you shouldn't use 0.018 to 0.033 inches, otherwise you will have a lot of sand in the pool. This begs the question, why are there different grain sizes at all? Because different systems work with different granulations. Two sizes are very common. 0.018 to 0.033 inches, also known as number 20 grade silica sand, and the size 0.028 to 0.05 inch. There is less back pressure, but at the same time the filter accuracy is a little worse. With a smaller granulation there is more back pressure, but the filtration accuracy is a little bit better. Ultimately it is a matter of taste. I would recommend flock cartridges for both grids. The next filter medium which can be used is glass, which is relatively popular. Why? Over time, a biofilm builds up in the sand, which is why you have to change the sand every 1 to 2 years. With filter glass, on the other hand, you only have to replace it after 3 to 4 seasons. You can even get the filter accuracy down to 5 micrometers. And if you then use flock cartridges, you get very good filter results. We also have it here in our pool lab, and I have to say that you can achieve great results with it. The next filter medium that can be used in sand filter systems are the so-called filter balls. They look like cotton balls, are very light and have the advantage of being very fine when it comes to filtering. Compared to relatively fine sand, you get about 25 times more accurate filter results, and that means it's really great for crystal clear water, without having to add flock cartridges. That means if you have a tank like this, you would normally put 50 pounds of sand in it. If you use filter balls, you only need 1.5 pounds. So that's really great. However, what we have to keep in mind with filter balls is that you must not use flock cartridges under any circumstances, as this would clog the filter balls. Furthermore, you should definitely use metal remover for well water. And with filter balls, backwash is also not possible. That means you have to open the tank, take out the filter balls, wash them out and put them back in again. These things have to be considered. Otherwise, this is also a great method to get very precise filter results. The next topic I would like to talk to you about is performance. That's exactly what's interesting about sand filter systems, because you can very quickly reach very high performance regions. As I said before, it's great that sand filter systems have very high pressure. Why does it actually matter? Because the pressure brings the water very far into the pool, and the water mixes better as a result. That means you get better results overall. Okay, we now have a certain performance, but how big can the pool be? We recommend for sand filter systems a ratio of 5 to 1, because of the high pressure. This means that if you have a 5,000 gallons pool, for example, the system flow rate of the sand filter system should be about 1,050 gallons per hour. If you have a 4,000 gallons pool, the minimum system flow rate should be about 800 gallons per hour. Of course, you can also use stronger systems, so the ratio could be 4 to 1, 3 to 1, or even 2 to 1. That is up to you. The important thing is that 5 to 1 is the minimum ratio you should have. I was talking about the system flow rate earlier. What is that again? The manufacturers specify different performances. If you act with the sand filter system as if you had no filter material in the sand filter, and you would not cover any height difference, then we have less back pressure. And as a result, the sand filter system can easily create 250 or 500 gallons more per hour in throughput. This is of course unrealistic, but if you just let the water circulate, then maybe it's not so bad. But nonetheless, in practice you have to filter the water, so that's why it is kind of a gross output, not particularly relevant for us. But this is very popular in advertising. Manufacturers often describe this performance as pump flow rate, so watch out. But you will also often find the net values, the so-called system flow rate. That means, for example, 800 gallons per hour at 5 psi. You have to be careful, look at the pump and system flow rate so that you can really compare them with each other. Some manufacturers only give the pump flow rate, not many do that, but then of course it's a bit difficult to compare. And what is the system flow rate now? You push through the sand here, and cover a difference in altitude. And then you have the system flow rate. For example, this sand filter system has a system flow rate of about 1,050 gallons per hour and a pump flow rate of 1,500 gallons per hour. And this sand filter a system flow rate of about 2,110 gallons and a pump flow rate of 2,500 gallons per hour. There are also some manufacturers who state this at 5 psi. We have that here with this sand filter system. Other manufacturers even state that at 10 psi, and then it is the case that at 10 psi, if you have the same performance, you have a higher back pressure, which means the performance is more valuable. But most manufacturers put it at 5 psi. But what is also important when choosing a sand filter is to pay attention to certain accessories when choosing the performance. If you now have a vacuum cleaner that is driven by the sand filter system, you have to look at what the minimum power of the vacuum cleaner is that you have to use. Or if, for example, you have solar mats on the roof of the garage or even on the roof of the house, then that means that you have to pump upwards, which is why you need significantly more power here as well. From that point of view, you have to think again about the required performance of your sand filter system. And it is important that you compare this with the system flow rate. It doesn't help you in practice to calculate with the pump flow rate. Please be careful here. What's also important when we're on the subject of performance, the stronger the sand filter systems, the louder they get, so please pay attention. A sand filter system with 200 watts is usually quieter than a sand filter system with 500 watts. There are sand filter systems in the high-end sector that are fairly quiet despite their high performance, but the costs are completely different here, which means we are in the $1,000 range and up. And from that point of view, for systems that are affordable, you can roughly imagine that the performance and the noise volume are related. And for systems that are affordable for normal customers, you can roughly set the rule: more power, higher noise volume. Make sure you can do something about the volume. We'll make an extra video about it. But you should definitely consider it, not that you suddenly get a noisy monster out of sheer enthusiasm. Although you are actually quite a fine when it comes to the volume load. There are 1.25 and 1.5 inches, which means the inner diameter of the hose. Then there are connections with a thread, like here, and there are also 2-inch connections. In our tests and product presentations, we also go into the connections. So pay attention. Take the knowledge that we offer with you, because otherwise you might make a bad purchase and get a sand filter system that you might not even be able to connect to your pool. Another important topic is, do you have a self-priming or a non-self-priming sand filter system? If your pool is buried in the ground or the hoses go over the pool wall, then you have to make sure that you use a self-priming sand filter system. And, also important, with a check valve. If you would use a sand filter system in such a scenario that is not self-priming, then simply nothing will happen. Please pay attention to that. And it is important that when you put the sand filter system into operation, there must always be water in the pump housing. This applies to all sand filter systems. If there is no water in it, because you didn't let the water run in before or you didn't fill it with water, then the sand filter system just draws air, runs hot and then has total damage. And the manufacturer or retailer will then refuse you the warranty or guarantee. The question still arises, do self-absorbing sand filter systems also make sense if we don't have a pool that is buried? I would say it is not necessary. For me, it would definitely be more important whether the performance fits, than the question of whether it is self-priming. It's really only a must, if the pool is buried or the hoses or pipes go above the water level. In this constellation it is important, but if you have an above-ground pool, then I would say it doesn't really matter. Well, Now we have already got a rough overview of sand filter systems, and if you want to see more individual product tests or assistance, then please subscribe to our channel and click the bell button. I would say goodbye for the moment, your Poolpanda team. Benny here. Bye.